This is LMG Boxfit and welcome to the video. I would like to announce that Usyk has become the undisputed world heavyweight champion. A competitive and closely fought contest where Usyk arguably won maybe the first couple of rounds, and then from that point on Fury started to take over. And then in round 8 or so onwards, Usyk starts coming back. Round 9 was a particularly good round for Usyk, where he almost stopped Fury on the spot. Fury was wobbling and flailing all over the place, could barely keep himself upright. Fury was very lucky that the fight wasn't stopped at that point. I was surprised with Fury's game plan because he didn't do much leaning, clinching or pushing. He probably clinched just a few times in the entire fight. His primary focus was to stay on the outside and pot shot Usyk with body shots, typically the shovel hook to the body. There was also the right uppercut to the head as well, which he had some good success with. Leaning on the ropes as well as moving around whilst in the corner was another tactic that Fury had also utilised in this fight as well. On the other hand, Usyk's primary focus was to establish the jab, use slips, maybe the odd feint, and try to get to the ideal range where he can work punches basically from mid-range, work the jab, the left cross, also the right hook as well. Usyk was also throwing the left hand to the body, though I would say that Usyk's primary focus was to work headshots. Fury did have more success than I had thought he would, and he also made Usyk miss a few looping left hands every so often. The combination from Usyk that caused the knockdown in round 9 was a 3-2 combination. This is where Usyk threw the right hook and the left cross from the southpaw stance. The left hand landed incredibly well on Fury's chin, very much snapping his head in the other direction, and he was stunned from that point on. As for the rest of the rounds from that point, I would say, again, Usyk was winning those rounds, maybe with the exception of the 12th. My view is there had to be at least a winner in this fight. There had to be one winner. I mean, it was close to being a draw. It was basically just a hair's breadth of it being a draw. But I think there had to be a winner. And for me, that was going to be Usyk. But I did think Usyk would find the fight somewhat easier. I mean, this was a much more competitive fight than what we saw with both of the AJ Usyk fights. In fact, I would say that this was Usyk's toughest fight since Mairis Breidis in the cruiserweight division. Going ahead, I imagine there will be a rematch between Fury and Usyk. Don't really see a point in having a trilogy fight with AJ. I mean, the first 2 fights were conclusive Usyk victories. So I mean, where Usyk goes from here, it's got to be either have the rematch with Fury, or possibly fight a mandatory such as Hrgovic. That will of course depend on how Hrgovic does against Dubois. Personally, I think Hrgovic will defeat Dubois, possibly by TKO if it doesn't go to points. Usyk could retire at this point, and that would be, well, he's achieved everything he needed to do in boxing. But yeah, there is a rematch clause, so it's likely that's going to be the route. Fury suggested running it back in October, which is approximately 5 months from now. I mean, that's still quite a distance. I mean, possibly they could have a fight earlier, then maybe they could set up a fight with someone else later in the year. So let's talk about the rest of the card. The chief support event for this fight was Opetaia versus Breidis. I think this was a clear victory for Opetaia. He took the first 8 rounds. Breidis didn't really start trying to come back into the fight until the later stage, the championship rounds, let's see, the round 10 onwards. And that's where Breidis started to show more aggression, and he was having success as well. I believe they both left the fight with broken noses or bloody noses, anything to that extent. Because otherwise, it was very much Opetaia coasting it at mid-range, snapping in and out using like pendulum steps, and then maintaining range using the jab, and then setting up the left cross either to the body or to the head. That was very much Opetaia's strategy in this fight. I do think Opetaia is the most dangerous cruiserweight at the moment. I would put Breidis in the number 2 position, Opetaia in the number 1 position. So it'd be good to see where Opetaia goes from here. I'm sure he can fight the other champions. I would pick him to beat Crispin and Smith, or even Riakporhe. I personally think Riakporhe is going to beat Crispin and Smith, then become, I think it's the RBF title holder. But don't quote me on that, or just provide a correction. Whether Opetaia can go up to heavyweight or not, I will not say. I mean, I wouldn't say he's a massive cruiserweight, but seems to be bigger than most of the other cruiserweights, I would say. Certainly has the punch power as well. The most controversial event on the card has to be, for me, the Cordina versus Cacace fight. Cacace landed a hook on the break. I think this might have been in the 3rd round, and Cordina was clearly stunned from this point on. Cacace then ups the pace, becomes more aggressive, gets straight on the inside and starts working power punches on the inside. He eventually stops Cordina. I can't remember exactly which round it was, but Cordina was saying in the pocket an awful lot. But I also think that Had that punch not landed earlier on the break, who knows, it might have been more favourable for Cordina. My prediction on that fight would have been, well, I didn't make a public prediction, but I would have suspected that Cordina would win by decision. I would have suspected that's what would have happened, but he gets completely destroyed by Cacace. I don't really understand what the game plan was from Cordina's corner. I was anticipating that Cordina would use the outside and pot shot more, particularly against a guy who was better on the inside, but he was actually willing to stay in the pocket, try to work inside. Clearly, Cacace was the better fighter there, and that's where he's most dangerous, and it played straight into Cacace's game plan. The next fight of interest was Agit Kabayel versus Frank Sanchez. Sanchez was the favourite going into the fight, however I had picked Kabayel to win. Personally, I think Kabayel's been very good with certain victories he's had, particularly the one over Makhmudov where he completely demolished Makhmudov. That was largely by using body shots to slow down the bigger man, and we saw a similar thing play out here as well against Sanchez. The difference here is that Agit Kabayel was marauding forward, constantly on the front foot, constantly aggressive, and was just destroying Frank Sanchez with body shots primarily. Sanchez also looked like he had a brace on his right leg, so it could have been possible that he came into the fight with an injury. That would have detracted from his performance. But for me, I'm not going to say this takes away too much from Kabayel's victory over Sanchez. Kabayel seems to have a habit of upsetting the odds, and that's certainly been the case with previous couple of fights with both Makhmudov and Sanchez. In terms of who Kabayel will be fighting next, there's rumours that he could be fighting Joseph Parker. I imagine Parker will be the favourite going into that fight. Personally, I'm tempted to actually pick Kabayel again because I think he's going to be an underdog, and he is quite underrated as a fighter. Parker does have wins over both Wilder and Zhang, but for me the Zhang fight is a controversial one because Zhang's work rate in the later stages of the fight was unusually lethargic. Now people will say, okay, well that's how Zhang is, but I'm thinking, well, no. Zhang was a lot more active against Hrgovic and also Joyce in the two fights that he had with Joyce. So the way I'm looking at it is that it's just, what was going on in training? Why was he not necessarily as well conditioned as he could have been? I mean, he was certainly heavier than what he was in those fights. I think possibly by 20 pounds. I also think Zhang could have stopped Parker if he wanted to. He landed two good left hands in moments in the fight and dropped Parker both in those occasions. Thank you for listening. For the purpose of brevity, I'm going to keep this review rather short. If you like the content, please like and subscribe, and hope to see you again soon.